It is Sunday, September 28th, and we are so back. I read 6 books last week. I don't know how because it was a full week of school, but I did read 6 books. They're not exactly super large books. There are a couple manga in here, but given that my average has been around 2 since the school year started, I'm gonna take it. And you know what the book I'm reading right now? It's a chunker. I'm 200 pages in, so I'm gonna say we're doing all right. I did give up on the Reading Rebellion. Just because I don't know. Hercule is working for me because I don't know. I don't know why Hercule is working for me. I don't think I'm going to be able to do Hercule plus another readathon. I just don't think that's in the cards for me. So there is one of these that I read for an objective for the Reading Rebellion. um, and I'll mention that, but like I'm not trying to finish that. Not that I could. It's the 28th, and that ends, you know, end of September. So let's get into it. The first book I read this past week is for her kid. It went for a readathon challenge. So what I did, because as I was just saying, I don't think I can do her kid and another readathon at the same time. What I did was I found a random readathon and I just put in the prompts. And for TBR, for a short time, I picked The Metalhead Next Door by Mamita. I received this in July, and for me, because I've got books that I've had since, I was in high school and I graduated 10 years ago, I count July as for a short time. But The Metalhead Next Door is a little BL one-shot manga following this college student who ends up moving next door to a metalhead. And on his first day, he takes this apartment because it's super, super cheap, but it's super, super cheap because it doesn't have heat. And so he nearly dies, and this metalhead, who is very nice and sweet on the inside, as most metalheads are, feeds him and basically nurses him back to life. The art style is cool, but it's really nothing special, and that's kind of how I felt about this. Like, it was cute, it was really nothing special. The characters were fine. I liked the backstory. We didn't really get any backstory on our Blondie here. Um, the the metalhead got some, but the Blondie did not. So that was kind of. I mean, I feel like if this was able to stretch out, if this was like a full series and not just a little one shot, the characters could have been more realized. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was fine. And after that, the one that I know for sure was for the Reading Rebellion. This was for Objective 1. And if that doesn't tell you how behind I was on that, because I read this last week, the last full week of the readathon, there you are. But Objective 1, I believe, was something like, I think it was 2 or more point of views, and I did pick Hostage by Francine Pascal, which is a Sweet Valley High book. And I picked it because there's always at least 2 point of views, always Elizabeth and Jessica, no matter what. I've blanked on her name for a minute there. But Hostage is one of the dramatic ones. In Hostage, they learn their friend Regina is back from Switzerland, where she was getting experimental hearing treatment so she can maybe not be deaf. But something's wrong. They think she's being held hostage. It's really stupid, but I have read stupider Sweet Valley High books. I think that this is a bad one, but not the worst one. I give it 2 out of 5 stars. Not much to say about Sweet Valley High. I'm sorry. All right, after that, for her kid, the LGBT, I don't exactly, queer alphabet, I think is what it's called on the spreadsheet, for gay. I read The Entanglement of Rival Wizards by Sarah Rosh. And I don't know if I didn't like this one as much because it did just feel too similar to her other books, or if it was because it took me so long to read. I was reading this for 11 days, which is insane when you see how small this is. But I was like hopping around doing lots of different books and stuff like that. And I shouldn't do that because then not only do I not read as fast, but also I don't enjoy what I read as much. But this follows Sebastian Walsh, who is in his final year of graduate school. I believe they're grad students. I think they're they're grad students, definitely. Who ends up having to do a project with Theo, who, Elthior, who is part of this family that Sebastian really, really just despises because they're very, like, billionaire evil situation. But they end up having to do a project together, and they find out that they have more in common than they might think. I really think that Rosh peaked with Go Luck Yourself. This felt kind of too similar to her holiday books, but also didn't have the charm that they had. I don't know, like I didn't like it that much. Like, it was fine and it had its moments. And as somebody who enjoys D&D, it was fine. But honestly, if I was not intent on keeping these beautiful books together, I'd probably get rid of it, because I didn't like it very much. It was cute enough, as I said. I liked some of the character stuff, but a lot of the trauma just seemed really melodramatic and not in like a good way, you know, like it seemed out of place with the rest of the story in a way that just felt kind of trite. So I give it 3.75 out of 5 stars. I think that if we're looking at Rash's books, I really think she peaked with Go Luck Yourself. Nightmare Before Christmas was cute enough. I loved Go Luck Yourself. And this one was just fine. So there's that. 3.75 out of 5. Then I read one that I didn't really have for any prompt for anything. And I read The Eighth by Matt Shaw. So this is the first book I've read by Matt Shaw. And if you've been around for a while, you know that I'm not a fan of extreme horror. I think that it's bad. I think it's poorly written. I think that it doesn't really have a point to it. I think that the utter lack of figurative language makes it a chore to read at best. I think that the focusing on the clinical side of things really just speaks to the fact that the author can't even face what they're writing, but they want you to see all of it, but they can't delve deep into the emotions of it because they're not mature enough for that. And I would be lying if I said that this was anything other than that. However, I would also be lying if I said that this is the worst extreme horror book I've ever read, because it's far from. So The Eighth follows this boy, and he's nameless. He doesn't get named the entire book. And he is a perpetual new kid. He's constantly moving around. And at the school he ended up going to, he ends up falling in with his kid, David. And unfortunately, David is pretty harshly bullied because he's gay. And these antagonists, as is common in extreme horror novels, our antagonists are just so flat, one-dimensional, kind of stupid. Have no real character to them. And so this book goes between flashbacks and also our nameless main character holding up one of his classes, a la Charlie Decker in Rage. So there are lots of things you could say about this book, and very few of them are really good. I do think that the overt sexual violence felt really out of place. Like there were some moments that were just kind of like, okay, and like it felt really just because Shaw is of the belief that you need to be sexually disgusting in order to write a good extreme horror novel. I feel like that's what it is, and given his history and given how he handles criticism, I think that's just genuinely what it was. I think he's like, well, I haven't had enough rapes in here yet, so he just put it in. I think it had moments where it could have been interesting. It honestly did. It's not a lost cause book. The ellipses were too much. I'm sorry, Matt, but you don't need that many ellipses. Dear God. There were so, like, it was like every other word ended with a dot, 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 dot. And I was over it by the end of the second chapter. I'm like, somebody teach this man about punctuation in a way that's more interesting, because I cannot handle all of these ellipses. The ellipses were bad. The writing in general was not good. It felt sophomoric at best. It felt like this is what the edgy guy in your high school creative writing club writes, and he really wants to see you read it because he really wants you to be really grossed out, but he's not a good writer. And that's what this felt like. I feel like this is written for people who are suffering from the literacy crisis. It wasn't good. But again, is it the worst extreme horror novel I've ever read? No. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And honestly, I think that was kind of generous. But again, it had moments. It had like bright spots. It had like, okay, I can see where this could be an interesting story. It just didn't get there, ever. Like the twist at the end was weird. I don't know how I felt about it. Like, I'm like, well, I did like one of the twists. The one twist, I don't want to spoil it. But the twist, about why, I'll say the twist regarding why this book is called The Eighth. I liked that one. The second twist, dealing more deliberately with David, I was kind of like, okay, Matt. Sure. Again, 2 out of 5. So, there's that one. Dear God, stop with the ellipses. After that, I reread a book, but as I have decided with Herkiad, rereads count if they're from the book wall. A reread from my shelves will not count, but a reread from the book wall does count. So I read Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun Volume 15 by Izumi Subaki. I read this for the last 10 years. This came out in 2024. Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun is my favorite manga series. It's one of my favorite anime series. I think it's so funny. Like, I just cackle reading this. This is the art style. It's very cute. Even on a reread, I was laughing. I was laughing so much. It was great. Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun follows Chiyo Sakura, who is a high school girl who has a crush on this boy in a different class named Nozaki. And when she goes to confess her love to him, she decides to do it by saying, "I'm your fan." Now, if Nozaki was normal, maybe they could have gotten to what she meant. But because Nozaki is both dense as a brick wall, and also because he's a shoujo manga artist, he gives her an autograph. And thus starts the most hilarious, like, meandering path of miscommunication and like, everybody gets to be the straight man at some point, which is my favorite thing. Like, everybody is so stupid and so crazy. Like, Sakura is genuinely kind of reasonable most of the time, especially compared to a lot of the other characters. But when she gets in Nozaki mode, oh man, like, it's insane. So funny. I really enjoyed the reread. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Obviously, I love it. All right. Then I read, for nonfiction, I read a book. I classified it under sociology. Sociology. Can I speak? I considered going under psychology, but this does deal more with society as a whole than individuals. And it does kind of deal with both, but it does do more with the former. And that is Must You Conform by Robert Lindner, which is an interesting little thing. I read this mostly in one day. This is a collection of about 5 essays talking about the state of society, the state of young people briefly. Talks about a lot of different things. I'll just read you the titles of these essays. There is The Mutiny of the Young, Homosexuality in the Contemporary Scene, Political Creed and Character, The Instinct of Rebellion, Must You Conform, and Education for Maturity. Now, this came out in 1956, so you can guess a few things from that. First up, we're really concerned about communism. However, a lot of the arguments that Lindner was making was really interesting. It really talked a lot about, his favorite word was psychopathy, which isn't really used in the way that we don't really use it anymore at all. But he is really, really into that. And he's talking about how, overall, throughout his entire collection, his main kind of point is that human beings are made to rebel. Like, we are not made to be cogs in the machine that our modern society, more so now than in the 50s, that our modern society does want us to be. That was kind of his overall thing. The one I liked the most was this thing about politics, because there were some really interesting things that I underlined. I'm looking for one in particular. All I'm saying is that he did talk quite a bit about Hitler, and he talked about communism and also fascism, how communism and communists are full of neuroses, and fascism is full of psychopathy. And he was also really discussing how communism really fails to work once it gets into power because of the nature of it and the nature of government in general, which was interesting. I also thought it was really interesting, maybe a bit tone deaf and weird, but again, from the 50s, was his thoughts on homosexuality, where he was really discussing, like, well, like obviously he saw it as something that was not great, but he also kind of saw it as, like, there was this one case study that he was talking about, he was like, this is fine, where this guy had, like, a wife and kids, but he was also, like, had a man on the side. He was like, well, that's fine, because he's, like, doing his duty and, like, has a family and stuff like that. I was like, interesting choice here. But I do think, yeah, I think he said some interesting and some good stuff. I think that it wasn't quite as drastic as I thought it would be, because solely based on the fact that it's from 1956. It said a lot of really interesting stuff. Again, the politics one was my favorite. I think it was some really interesting things. And I know that, you know, history is a circle, but there's so much in the politics one that I read and I was just like, oh boy. So there's that. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. My least favorite was the one about instinct. I don't know, it just dragged and it didn't quite grip me as much. But no, there was a really, obviously in the 50s, I think the 50s was the best written books 99% of the time they were written in the 50s. This is one of my favorite little quotes here. It is finally he who offers us a way of adjustment, and adjustment he means like conformity, through acting out our aggressions on the world stage. And then from our skins make the lampshades to shield his eyes while he reads the history of a brutalized earth. That's gnarly, man. 4 out of 5 stars. So that's what I read. Out of what I'm keeping, what I'm getting rid of from this, I am getting rid of this, getting rid of this, keeping this just because I want to keep them together, getting rid of this, getting rid of this because I already have one, and keeping this. So I wonder actually if I could. Anyway, I also have 2 other books I'm getting rid of. The first one is Class B because I did order a new cover. I have not been able, my debit card keeps getting fucking frauded, so I have not been able to purchase these new covers, but they're sitting in my Amazon cart waiting, but I do have a new cover of Class B out now. I'm also getting rid of Lost Souls. And like, why are you getting rid of Lost Souls, you may ask? You love Lost Souls. It was one of your favorite books ever. And that's because I caved, and the one book I have to haul is a hardcover of Lost Souls, so I don't need the paperback anymore. I've got this beautiful hardcover. I'm so excited to reread it. Probably won't happen this year. It shouldn't happen this year. I shouldn't reread it this year. But oh man. Very excited. So there's that. That is my week in review. Again, much more successful than the last couple of weeks. And as I said, yeah, a lot of these were pretty small. However, I'm rereading Black House right now. I started it this morning. I'm like 180 pages in already. So I'm feeling like it's the hardcover version too, so like 650. I'm feeling like I got it. We're back. You know, I'm feeling that. So that is everything. I will talk to you later.